Hello, I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The unrest in Baltimore has affected all of us in this area and indeed across the country. Mariana Cordier, a local attorney, is here to explain the effect that out-of-control behavior can have on the futures of the young people who participated. The May issue of the Beacon has its usual interesting stories about our health and other important facts about how each of us lives today. Stuart Rosenthal, editor and publisher of the Beacon, is here to report. Montgomery County may try something new after much discussion by finally having the Liquor Control Board, the Economic Development Division or Department, and ride-on buses become public-private partnerships. Jane DeWinter, who comments for this program on a regular basis, has the details about what this will mean for all of us. Foster children, who face many difficulties as they grow up, face even more challenges as they age out of the system when they turn 21. Agnes Leshner, the former director of Montgomery County Child Welfare Services, is here to fill us in. Mariana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Boy, we saw all those images.
Yes, in Baltimore.
To me, in Baltimore, all those kids out, young people, I shouldn't say just kids, but primarily it seemed like they were young adults who were involved in rioting and looting. But next day, many arrests?
Well, you know, the bar has sent out some emails asking for assistance with the bail and bond reviews because there were so many all at once in the system that were picked up and arrested. And the sad thing is that, you know, that's what was so great about Martin Luther King, was the advocating peaceful demonstration as opposed to riot and looting, because it dilutes the message, right? If you're engaging in criminal activity.
But ironically, after the death of Martin Luther King, April 4th, 1968, those same calls came out, desperation, because they rounded people up and they put them actually at RFK Stadium, DC Stadium, and lawyers come out. So you had the same call. You
have pretty much the same call, and the sad thing is that, you know, a lot of these young people are going to be processed through the system. If they're juveniles, they will hopefully be only in the juvenile system. Just because you're under the age of 18 does not mean that they can't choose to try to prosecute you as an adult. If you're close enough to 18, they can do that. So you really damage your future, because to have a record, you know, anytime you apply for a job, you know, the question isn't have you ever been convicted, the question is have you ever been arrested?
Well, let's go to that. What's the sense? I mean, certainly they've been arrested,
Right.
But the whole tone in Baltimore of the state's attorney coming out of becoming an instant media. I mean, she knew her moment was there, and she took full advantage of it. The mayor's trying to recover there.
Yeah, that was a really weird scenario.
But it's really been directed at the actions of the police.
Right.
And that the kids, you know, everyone's upset that kids were called thugs and all that. Do you think the prosecutors are really going to go after these kids?
You know, it's a tough question, because you can't elect to apply the law willy-nilly how you want.
Prosecutorial discretion is key to what they do.
Prosecutorial discretion, but will they exercise it when they're under the scrutiny of the media and everybody else? I mean, let's not forget that CVS burned down to the ground, and the neighborhood mall was looted, and
some police officers were injured, which
exactly. Right,
you
so
know,
those are
serious.
You know, okay, so if you're in the street, maybe throwing, you know, a can of soda, are they going to prosecute you? I guess that's the discretion. But you know, if you're a part of the group that engaged in you know, causing the CVS to burn down, that's arson. Those are serious events and crimes. And so I think that the prosecution of Baltimore, the prosecutor needs to be very careful how she does it, because also it may impact the prosecutions she does want to pursue. If there's a bias shown, a discrimination shown, that's really important to be very careful for, because keep in mind that ultimately the bottom line, and not to get on my soapbox,
we can't be on soapboxes here,
is the destabilization of the system.
Right.
We have to have confidence in the system. We need to have confidence in the police. There is no confidence in Baltimore, or very little confidence in Baltimore from the African American community with the police, and that's
but that goes both ways, and that's why I was saying it's like some police officers were injured. and it'll create difficulties if those are ignored probably because of, from the perspective of the police, who already feel like.
Well, she's already sent them down the. She's
well,
already.
But careful, because
away.
the police needs the help of the community when investigating crimes, for protecting people, when dealing with protective orders, you know, with domestic violence and all those kinds of things. So, we need to work on improving that confidence, because the community needs the police and the police need the community. It's a partnership.
There was also that community center. It was just under construction, a senior center and affordable housing that was burned down. It wasn't even in the middle of things. What led people to go there? And
I'm not really sure. And that's the thing about riots, right? That's the thing about the uncontrolled behavior. It can grow and expand and enter areas that are unexpected. What makes me most sad about all of it is that it's that group, you know, that community's own community. Right. You know, it's not like it was very self-destructive, and that church that raised all those monies to be able to have that home for their own elderly. That's tough.
I was going to add that, you know, many of the foster children who age out of the system, while they're in the system, they either have foster parents, group homes, social workers who give them guidance. But when they age out at age 21, they really don't have any group to associate with. And so frequently they get caught in crowds and behaviors that are really maladaptive and have long-term consequences that they don't realize.
And the foster care system, I really think, needs to be go through a little bit of an adjustment and understand that you can't just push them off the cliff at 21. And having come up through the foster care system, they're at a disadvantage with children that have had a stable home environment. And so it's really important not to let them go at 21 completely, and have some nets to catch them when they have difficulties or needs.
We're going to talk more about that in the final segment. Okay. But thank you, and hopefully these kids will make it okay in Baltimore.
Or make better decisions.
All right, Stuart.
Yes, Don. What's in the
greatest newspaper, the greatest publication that we see in this area is the Beacon. I mean, again, I find it over and
increasingly
over again.
true.
But I just more, you know, as I'm flipping through this month's Beacon, I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of useful information in there.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk about story one.
Well, the kinds of stories that really catch my eye a lot and that we like to print are the research that's going on in the scientific community that seems to hold such potential for solving the kinds of problems that we all have. Right. So we have two I want to talk about today. One has to do with research into brain cancer. It's you know, Ted Kennedy died of glioblastoma, and they've been researching ways to do it. But you know, even with surgery and with radiation and with chemo, it comes back. It comes back.
Sure.
And I think it's always fatal. So they've been experimenting with these vaccines where you take the patient's own cells, you treat them in such a way as to turn them into attack cells against the cancer cells. They know what they're looking for. You inject them back into the body, and they seem to work a little bit better. It seems to help with survival. But not as much as they had hoped. So someone came up with this brilliant idea. I don't know where it came from. It's one of these sort of simple, elegant, cheap ideas. And they said, well, you know, we're injecting these into the arm or whatever. What if we gave them a tetanus diphtheria vaccine the day before? Because when you do that, it sort of brings a lot of the immune system up. It sort of gets it geared up and revved up, and then we gave them their own cells. Would that make any difference? So they took a small group, 12 patients that were going to be getting this vaccine, gave half of them a mini tetanus vaccine, not even a full vaccine dose, the day before they got their. You wouldn't believe the difference in the results.
Wow.
The first 6 who did not get that, only one of them lived past 2 years, but they lived 3.5. So they did feel that suggested that the whole process of the vaccine was helpful. The other 6, everyone lived past 2 years. One lived almost 5, one lived almost 6.
Okay.
And the only difference was that tetanus vaccine, which is, you know, costs nothing and, you know, such a simple thing. So it's very interesting to think that they're coming closer to.
You know, we're seeing more and more stories about how it really is using the cells in our body, the DNA that's already there, moving around, because those cells are going to find the little nooks and crannies and the big masses, and it's as exciting. I mean, that really does seem to be the wave of medicine, especially in cancer therapy.
Right, exactly.
And brain cancer, I'm sure, is going to be going up, because I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I'm always nervous with the cell phone, you know.
So far, they say they haven't got any direct evidence.
I know, but that makes me nervous because you know you feel that phone getting hot by your ear, and I know it's got some.
Use the Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So what you're suggesting is a future story in the Beacon, aren't you?
Maybe.
We've actually done that. But
give us story number 2.
Okay, number 2. This has to do with, what is my second story? You do this to me sometimes.
No.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
How about the front page article?
Oh, we have a very interesting story about the 70th anniversary of World War II, of Victory in Europe Day.
Right.
And now this isn't really something we go on and talk about at great length, but I'll just point out that we found 5 Beacon readers who were vets from that war. One from the Battle of the Bulge, a nurse who was with a group that entered a concentration camp and took care of the victims who were still alive. It's just very poignant stories. A fellow who was a submariner on a World War I submarine in World War II.
He looks fit. He's your
yes.
cover.
Well, they're all in their mid-90s.
Yeah.
They're incredible. I mean, you sort of think, the people who survived that are really, the toughest of the top,
sure.
right? The cream of the crop. So they are still around, many of them, and they're telling their stories, and they're fascinating.
What about their hearing?
Thank you. That was another story. See,
She's
slipped
good.
my mind. She's very good. So
Hey, I'm
the other
after
story,
your job. No.
the other research story. So we know that when we get older, we tend to lose elements of our hearing. We sort of can't tell the difference between certain sounds. Pitches get lost. We've known for years. I knew when I was in elementary school, there was the cochlea in the inner ear, the inner ear, that sort of nautilus-like spiral that has all the ear cells. And each of the cells in there, the thousands of them, have little cilia, little hairs, that are different lengths. And the shorter the length, the higher the pitch they are tuned to, and the longer, the lower the pitch, so like a piano with its strings. So chickens and a lot of other animals are able to regenerate these cells when they lose them. So they're able to, make a chicken deaf, and
I'm gonna use
2 weeks
words
later
here.
they can hear again.
Who knew?
I wondered, they don't explain how they can tell what chickens can and can't hear, but anyway, it seems
I
to.
didn't know they had ears.
I guess it's an evolutionary advantage to be able to hear that rooster early in the morning.
That's right. That's right.
We've got about
Cluck, cluck.
45 seconds.
So really
let's
quick.
get
So
to
anyway,
the chicken
they've
ears.
now figured out what it is in the cells that makes them grow, and what retinoic acid is a common substance, which apparently has to do with it. So they've been able to grow them in the petri dish. They're able to add the different amounts of these ingredients and produce the cells they're looking to produce of different. So maybe they can manage to figure out how to do that in human cells someday, so that when we lose pitch, we can figure out how to restore those lost sounds. I think it's fascinating. I think it would be nice if they could do it before I start losing my hearing. I'm already losing my memory, but the hearing is another thing.
And I don't want to say what, it's just a joke, but I think we all start losing our hearing at some point. It becomes more difficult. But we're done.
Thank you.
We can go on.
There are more stories, but
I love the Beacon.
pick up a copy.
We'll be right back after these messages. And please, while you're out, pick up a copy of the Beacon. And we're back. Jane DeWinter, welcome back.
Thank you.
A topic that seems to come up every year for many years. Montgomery County, aren't we the only county government in the entire country that has control of liquor?
Almost, yes. Yes,
One of them?
almost, yes, almost the only one.
So let's talk about the privatization, our public-private partnership. We've got liquor, and then two surprises to me was economic development and ride-on buses.
Right, right.
What's the thoughts?
Well, I think that they're not all part of one combined effort. It's really independent reasons or separate reasons for each thing. I mean, the liquor control, there are perennial issues with being able to get the types of wine, fine wine, the variety, et cetera. That's really the main thing. Restaurants complain.
Let me ask you on this. Isn't it great irony that the fastest growing wine and beer importer and distributor in this country is Total Wine and Beverage? Huge growth. And they're headquartered in Rockville and Potomac. But they cannot sell in Montgomery County.
Exactly. Exactly.
I just find that fascinating.
Well, so anyway, so Hans Riemer introduced. I mean, it comes up time and time again. But so he has, asked.
Okay.
He brought the issue up to the council this fall, and so they're looking at that. And so that there are things. I mean, one of the issues is that the liquor business that Montgomery County runs does contribute between $25 and $30 million to the county's revenue each year, so that there's a concern about losing that. On the other hand, the fact that all of the employees are county employees and have, pension liability, future pension obligations, there may be some offsets there, but the issue is really being presented as an issue of being able to actually improve service, et cetera. There has been pushback, and not just from people who would like to remain county employees, but also there are a lot of people who like the county being able to control liquor sales, because it's time, it's where they are, it's licensing, it's the fact that you can't go and buy liquor from carryouts, all through the night and things like that.
I just find it bizarre. So let's go to the business. I mean, in case we have any liquor, because we've gone through this year after year, and from my point of view, I've never heard a good reason why we're in the liquor business. But
right. Well, I mean, the good reasons that people are citing, or the reasons they're citing that they say are good, are the control and being able to control the hours.
You can regulate that.
Yes.
You
Exactly.
can regulate times of sale and such without the county being in the business of actually distributing the alcohol. I mean, I've heard many restaurants complain that they make the orders very far in advance because it's hit or miss if they're going to get the delivery.
Right,
So.
I understand that. I'm just saying is that
Right.
there has been significant pushback because of the other
But the
issues.
new part of this are the ride-on buses and the Montgomery County economic development.
Right. Well, so ride-on buses came up because the county is thinking about establishing an independent transit authority. And I think that that's less about, okay, we need to do something with ride-on, but more of looking at perhaps having some public-private partnerships to do some of the transit projects that are being discussed, like Purple Line, CCT, et cetera.
Does this apply to school buses too, or that's a whole separate matter?
No, school buses are different.
Yeah.
Totally, those are school system.
So
employees.
the Barwood and other things coming into that, or just within what the county is?
No, just what the county
stuff.
is
Okay.
looking at, yeah.
Okay.
And for that proposal, there's no, part of it is to maintain the drivers and the people working for Ride-On as county employees, but to put it under Independent Transit Authority.
Okay.
And then economic development, that's the last and sort of the latest one that's come up. And so there's talk of presenting a, developing like an independent economic development authority, taking the whole Department of Economic Development and making it into a public-private partnership
And the
or
reason for that
nonprofit.
is what?
I've talked to a number of people, and the
We have
reason,
just about a minute left, so-
for that is because they feel like, and this goes beyond Ike, they feel like county executives in most of the history of Montgomery County have picked not very good people to head up the Department of Economic Development, and they would like to take it out of the county executive's hands and have other people be in charge of selecting somebody good to run this.
And who would do that?
Well, it would be whoever. I mean, it would be an authority that probably the county executive would appoint some people. I mean, it's the same thing like a metro board where different stakeholders appoint members. So the business community would likely put somebody on that board.
A lot of changes, a lot of news here.
Yes,
Jane DeWinter,
yes.
news bringer. So chances of passing real quick, about 10 seconds.
I
all
think
these
the
three.
Economic Development Authority will go forward. I'm not sure the transit will happen this
Okay.
year.
Liquor?
I don't really know yet. I
Set
mean,
our vodka free? No? Okay. Thanks, Jane. Appreciate it. Agnes, welcome.
Thank
This is,
you.
I believe, your
Thank
first
you.
time on the show.
I think so.
It is fantastic. Welcome here. So, you talked earlier about the foster children and the context of Baltimore. We've got issues here, and it's throughout the state and throughout the country. These kids growing up in the foster system, 21, they're no longer in the foster system. They're adults and they move on. Maybe, if you could start, what brings kids into the foster system, and maybe real briefly, what is our foster care system in Montgomery County?
So the reason that children come into foster care is because they've been significantly physically abused by their caretakers, mostly parents, or sexually abused, or chronically neglected. Young children who have been chronically left alone in situations where they could be in danger. So aside from the physical problems that creates being removed from an unsafe situation leaves a huge emotional impact on these children.
Sure.
People
who may not be fully aware of how much in danger they are.
Right. So the people you trust most are your parents. Sure. And now it's the people that you trust most who have disappointed you and haven't protected you, for example, in sexual abuse cases. And so they're removed, and the first place that we tend to look is relatives. Can a relative take care of the child? If a relative cannot, then they go into foster families. And in Montgomery County, we're fortunate we have about 300 foster families.
Okay.
Never enough, so we're always looking for additional families who will take foster children.
And what's the commitment of a foster family?
They have to pass certain licensing regulations. They have to have adequate room. They have to have an income that is totally independent of anything that they get from the government. They have to pass criminal background checks. And then they have to have several visits from a licensed social worker who will assess their emotional stability.
Sure.
The issue comes up with teenagers. There are many teenagers who come into the foster care system, and frequently foster families are not prepared to take on teenagers. Teenagers, as we all know, are difficult enough as it is.
Teenagers
challenging.
with even more baggage than
Exactly.
a normal adolescent.
Emotional
right.
baggage, academic difficulties. Sure. They don't listen. They're always testing the situation.
Now let me interrupt you. I believe there's a phone number that you've come with, or something. There's something that people can learn more about the foster care system here. Child welfare.
I think that there is a number, sort of a central number that they can call, which is 240-777-4417, which is a screening line, and they can then ask for whatever they want. Okay. The problem with the youth who turn 21, as we said, is it's federal regulation and state regulation that they have to leave the system. Before age 21, at least they have a social worker who is sort of guiding them. At age 21, they don't have that, and so they're totally on their own. Now, there is a small program we were talking about. Is there sort of a safety net? In Montgomery County, we're very lucky. We have a small program that's actually coordinated by the Center for Adoption at the moment, and they've pulled together 5 agencies to provide a variety of services for these youth leaving the foster care system. So they're 19 to 25, and they can have mentoring, job placement, help with getting into Montgomery College, but it's a very small, wonderful program, but very, very small. And that's what these kids need. They need somebody who grabs them and say, go to school, go, get a job.
And the support, the emotional support to be, I'm here if you need me, if you have questions. It's more of an intensive mentorship that they need. And it's important because those are the times and the age where you can slip and you can find yourself, and you're no longer a child, so the benefit of the doubt is not going to be given to you, and life choices are huge.
Well, and you think that families, intact families, or just children who are living with a parent, most of them don't have a complete cut when they're 21 that, okay, you don't have any financial support from us, you don't have any health insurance from us, we stop celebrating your birthday, you stop coming home for holidays, all of those things. I mean, that doesn't happen for other children, and so all of a sudden these children at 21.
Are there relationships that continue on with the foster families and the kids going on?
They're wonderful foster parents, and we expect a lot from them, and there are a lot of them who have an attachment. But there are a lot of youth who grow up in group homes and shelters and places, and they don't have that kind of support. The problem is they're not often ready for mentorship because they don't trust people. So a mentor comes along and says, I'll be your friend, and they'll say like, oh sure, just like all these other people have.
Do you think a senior citizen would be able to be like a adoptive grandparent to these kids, help them out?
Some yes, some no, but there's no way to predict, unfortunately. The thing they really need are jobs and housing.
Jobs and housing, that's the last word today. Thank you. Unfortunately, I just wish we had more time. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers, and I invite you to join us again next week at this very same time.